All right, welcome to Making the Familiar Strange. My name is ZimmerMas, and I'm Tri-Faith's Education and Program Associate. In this program, I'm here to welcome you, to remind you of how Making the Familiar Strange works, and to assist our special guests in whatever ways they prefer. So remember that the goals of this program are to take a look at Abrahamic stories together and to take on new perspectives by looking at familiar or less familiar stories with fresh eyes and with new points of view. Today, we are very excited to be welcoming Temple Israel's Executive Director, Nate Shapiro, who will share a unique perspective on the story of Adam and Eve's departure from the Garden of Eden. But first, let's remember that our rules for this program are to be respectful, to reconsider what assumptions you might be bringing to this story, to speak from your own point of view rather than on behalf of a larger group of people. So the useful thing is to use those I statements. And keep in mind that in looking at these nuanced stories, we're all trying to hear and consider a new perspective that might differ from our own, and it's okay if we don't completely agree with it. That's part of the joy of this program, is to be able to consider something that we might not even agree with. So in terms of announcements, next month on June 21st, we'll have Sharon Royers of Countryside Community Church sharing a Christian perspective on the New Testament story of Jesus's visit to Martha and Mary. For today, as I mentioned, we'll be hearing Nate's perspective on this story from the Hebrew Bible. He's planning to keep an eye on the chat to see any questions or comments that you post in there throughout the hour. And I'll also keep an eye out for anything that Nate doesn't catch, just in case. When he opens things up for discussion, please feel free to participate in whatever way is most comfortable to you, whether that's through the chat or unmuting yourself. And Nate is flexible about how you like to participate, so please do not be afraid to get into the conversation. Nate, thank you for being here. I'll hand things over to you to introduce yourself and get started.
All right. Thank you so much, Allie, and good afternoon, everybody. As Allie said, I'm Nate Shapiro, member of Temple and also the executive director. Again, I'm very honored that you're all taking an hour out of your day to come and hopefully join this discussion. I want to first off thank the Tri-Faith Initiative for inviting me to do this sort of presentation. Gave me an opportunity to do some deep dive into the Bible and work some parts of my brain that I haven't worked in a while in thinking about these kind of things, and it's been a very pleasurable experience. So let me get things started as I get the presentation up. 1 second. All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint presentation?
Looks great.
All right, so sneaky snakes and 401ks. We're going to be talking about Adam and Eve. And one question that's always been on my mind of kind of how, human beings went from being animals to being the creatures that we are now, which are somehow apart from animals. So my sort of thesis is that the story of Adam and Eve is an explanation on how human beings irreversibly transcended our animalness through fundamental shifts in our relationships with nature, God, other humans, and our inner selves. And I think there are examples of these shifts in the Adam and Eve story. So who am I? Why am I talking about this? And should you listen to me? As I said, I'm Nate Shapiro, member of Temple Israel. I'm talking about this issue because I spend way too much time on Wikipedia. Read the article about feral humans, which led me to think about how Adam and Eve sort of represented the domestication of humans by God, and what a very creative explanation that was. As a Judaic Studies minor, Jewish communal professional, Hebrew speaker, and friend of the clergy temple, I feel I've got some tools and some resources to provide some hopefully interesting framing to a very well-known story from the Bible. I was talking to Rabbi Stoller about this and, picking his brain because I want to sound as intelligent and not waste your time as much as possible. And he provided 2 books to help me. One is called The Emergence of Ethical Man by Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. And if anybody has studied with Rabbi Stoller, they know he's a big fan of Rabbi Soloveitchik. And then another book, The Beginning of Wisdom by Leon Cass, were very helpful. In addition, the Bible was also very helpful. So this story really begins in Genesis chapter 2. And I have a summary here. The Lord God put the man in the Garden of Eden to tend it. He tells the man that he is allowed to eat from every tree except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If the man eats from that tree, he will die. The Lord God decides that it's not good for the man to be alone. He needs a companion. So the Lord God forms animals, birds, and brings each of these to the man, who gives them names. However, none of these creatures is found to be a suitable partner for the man. So the Lord God puts the man into a deep sleep, removes one of the man's ribs, and from the rib, he forms a woman. So as we were thinking about this story, the nature of humanity at this point is that Adam, or the man, is motivated by biological instinct. But God says to Adam that he may eat of any tree in the garden except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which God claims will kill Adam. The feral Adam has just taken his first step towards transcending his animal nature, because now Adam has a motivation beyond his own survival. He is now motivated by the command of God. And Adam has a choice. He can obey or disobey God. I guess when you want to get into issues of free will versus not free will, maybe he didn't have a choice, but for simplicity's sake, we're going to assume that, man has free will, and Adam was left with a choice. An interesting part of chapter 2 of Genesis, it was thinking about Adam's sort of relationship with his surroundings. He was put into this garden and he was one with his surroundings. There was trees, there was Adam, there's all that. And Adam did not see himself as any sort of separate entity. God then, brought in beasts and animals. And in this step, God sort of partnered with Adam. As it says in the Bible, that God brought these beasts, brought them before Adam so that Adam could name them. So the act of classifying animals and having Adam classify the animals was another step in sort of humanity's journey from animal to the humans we are now. Because by classifying all these animals, you're really sort of setting yourself apart from them. And you're saying, these are the animals, I am naming them. God sort of gave Adam the authority to do that. And Adam was forced to reflect on what these animals are and their relationship with nature, as well as his own as being a sort of, not master of these animals, but separate from. When we think of our own lives, the act of naming is symbolic and really used in very few cases, but there are cases where there is a power differential, right? We have children, we name those children, because we have sort of ownership over them. people, name their cars. My almost 2-year-old daughter is just learning this feature and starting to name some of her stuffed animals, because she knows they're not the same as her. She's different. So I think this act of classifying animals really shifted Adam, the animal, to move towards a more self-aware sort of animal / human. So Adam classifies these animals, and he is sort of set apart from these animals and set apart from nature, which isolates him further. And God sees this as a problem, and God has another plan, which is to create from Adam a woman. Not to get too into the biology of it, but a woman is very much like a man, but different enough in a lot of ways that it makes for a good match. Not commenting on who should be together or anything like that. By creating a woman from Adam, God also creates the world's first community. And the community is a very important and essential part of human experience. I think that all of us that are involved in Tri-Faith can understand the powers of community and how that does separate us from our animal nature. Obviously, you have animals that live in herds or live in packs and do have relationships with each other, but no other animal that I'm aware of, can have such complex communities where we can have our families and we can be a part of a community of people across the entire world. I mean, for instance, at this very moment, we are a community of people that, well, you're listening to me, but we're discussing Adam and Eve, and we're nowhere close to each other. And yet this community is transcending, time and space. Well, space, at least. So by creating Eve, or the woman, God creates the first community, and community is a function that moves Adam, the animal, more towards Adam, the human. Let me just check the chat. All right, we got a question from Laura French. One tree or two, is the tree of life same as a tree of knowledge? So I'm going to answer this as best as I can, acknowledging I'm not an authority on this, and I could be wrong. I think the tree of life is not as relevant to this story. The tree we're going to be talking about is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So really, there's a lot of different trees in Garden of Eden. I think, your regular type trees that we're used to, but the special tree is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Oh, look at this. Allie has a different answer. One thing that maybe throws me off a lot is that in Judaism, we use the term tree of life really as a metaphor for the Holy Torah a lot. So it's a good question. I'm gonna walk it back a little bit and say, I don't know if there was a distinctive tree of life in the Garden of Eden. Could be, but it wasn't such an important part of the story, at least that I'm talking about. So some other things in Genesis 2 that I wanted to talk about was the issue of vegetarianism. At this point with Adam in the Garden of Eden, he and Eve were vegetarians by default. That vegetarianism is sort of the natural tendency of humans, as opposed to in the modern world, where I would say being a vegetarian is more of an ethical or religious or maybe health choice against the norm. I don't know if you all were taught the same thing in your high school biology classes, but I remember being told that humans were omnivores, eating both meat and and plants and everything. So this is the natural tendency. Somebody put in the chat, and I think this was a real super good point. Seth says vegan more specifically. And I think you're absolutely right, Seth. You know, as Adam and Eve were, you know, kind of the two humans there, and they weren't eating meat, I don't believe that they were, you know, raising cattle or anything. And if they were, definitely not mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. And, you know, the other exception to that, I guess I would think of is if Eve was nursing, but that doesn't happen in the garden. They get thrown out of the garden before, you know, any of that stuff happens. So, Seth, I think you're right that Adam and Eve were vegan, and I think you could make the argument that maybe veganism is the more natural tendency. Now, the vegetarianism thing appeals to me personally, as I used to be a vegetarian, you know, in middle school and high school for ethical reasons. Somebody told me about the process of raising chickens for meat and all that, and were telling me details, and I thought, wow, that's terrible. We should not be doing that to animals. And so, you know, I was a vegetarian. I since went away from vegetarianism, but, you know, if I try to put myself into the mind of a feral human or a caveman or something like that, you know, I don't think it would occur to me to go chasing down other animals to kill them and eat them. You know, I drive by a lot of roadkill, and none of it looks appetizing to me. So one, excuse me, other note, I talked about looking up the article about feral humans on Wikipedia. So when it comes to feral children, there are documented cases of children sort of going feral. These cases can generally stem from a child running away or being abandoned or being forced into a very isolated life. A lot of these circumstances are abuse and neglect. But it seems to me one of the things that creates this going feral is the severe lack of a human community. And they go into the wild and, you know, they don't develop language skills and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm not an expert on feral children or anything like that, but it was just kind of my opinion. All right, so here we got some more things in the chat. Laura said, but they would have observed the other mammals feeding their babies. I think going back to the vegan thing. Laura, I think that's a good point. I don't know how to respond to that. And then my own mother, who is here, Joan Sudman Shapiro, said, how about eggs from bird nests? Not sure if she was asking me if that would have occurred to me, but, you know, maybe Adam and Eve saw the eggs, but I don't know if they would have cooked those. I don't think in the Garden of Eden that, I don't think Adam and Eve had the knowledge of, you know, cooking things at that point, or at least in what I read, there's no indication of that at that time. All right, so, you know, moving on to Genesis chapter 3, which starts, you know, with the serpent. So this is Genesis chapter 3, the snake bit, which I think is a hilarious pun, and I'm very proud of it. The serpent, the craftiest animal, speaks to the woman, asking her about God's command. Did God say they couldn't eat from any tree in the garden? The woman clarifies that they're not supposed to eat from or even touch the tree in the middle of the garden, or else they will die. But the serpent claims that they won't actually die. God, the serpent claims, knows that if humans eat from that tree, their eyes will be opened and they'll become like God, knowing good and evil. Looking at the tree, the woman sees that it is beautiful and its fruits look appetizing, especially since eating it will supposedly make her wise. So she takes fruit from the tree and eats it. She also offers some fruit to the man, and he eats it as well. Their eyes are opened and they realize they are naked. They sew loincloths out of fig leaves to cover themselves. I'm just going to keep going on chapter 3. In the evening, the man and the woman hear the Lord God walking in the garden, and they hide from him. The Lord God calls to the man. The man explains that what he heard God, he was afraid because he knew he was naked. The Lord God asks the man how he knew he was naked. Did he eat from the forbidden tree? The man says that the woman gave him fruit from the tree. In turn, the woman says that the serpent tricked her. The Lord God pronounces a curse on the serpent because it has done this. The serpent will crawl on its belly in the dust, and there will be enmity between the serpent and the woman's offspring. Her offspring will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. Then the Lord God said to the woman, saying that her pain in childbirth will be greatly increased, and that her husband will rule over her. And because the man has listened to his wife and eaten from the forbidden tree, the ground he works will be cursed, and he will bring forth food with much toil, eventually returning to the dust himself. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. So in this section, we have some change in relationships in terms of relationship with the divine. So this passage shows the first time a human noticed or cared about the divine presence. After having disobeyed God by eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve felt shame in their nakedness. Only after recognizing their lowliness were they able to discover or maybe even perceive what is truly high. The turn toward divinity is founded on discovery of our own lack of divinity. So I think that passage is really cool, that prior to eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam didn't seem to care too much about God. Once he had the knowledge of good and evil, that's when he began to fear God. And only when he was naked did he feel, that kind of shame. And I think it says something about how to accept a divine presence into your own life is by acknowledging your humility and humbleness. Let's see. Oh, all right. Happy to say Karen Euler loved that graphic. Relationship to self-consciousness. So God calls to Adam and Eve in this paragraph, says, where are you? On the surface, is a very simple question. God's in the garden, he's looking for Adam and Eve, where are you? But, if you dig a little deeper, it's really kind of a question of Adam and Eve's soul, because it is in transition. Where is your soul? Where are you on the journey? It's a question that requires self-examination and assessment. Adam replies, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. At first, Adam attempts to blame his hiding on the sound of God, but then fesses up that he was afraid because he was naked, and so he hid. Adam's answer is very revealing because it's clear he knows that he was a naughty boy. He then blames Eve before admitting to disobeying the one rule of the garden. Eve also passes blame to the serpent before fessing up. So in this exchange, God does not argue with either Adam or Eve. God accepts, their confession. God curses the serpent, but God does not curse Adam or Eve. He curses the land, for man's sake. Very likely, and this is a quote from the Cass book that I think sums this up very nicely. Very likely, God has a good reason to be satisfied with the inquest. For the all too human practice of shifting blame and denying responsibility for wrongdoing proclaims, despite itself, the existence of good and bad, right and wrong. Making excuses for oneself is, in face, a concession that something needs to be excused. Neither man nor woman says, I did it and I'm proud of it. Judgmental self-consciousness gives birth to conscience. Conscience, in turn, can face the music to learn and to live with the consequences of one's wrongful choice and deed. So by the very act of trying to shift the blame and that kind of thing, that indicated to God that they obviously now have the capability to discern right from wrong. That, and the fact they were hiding because they were naked and they realized they were naked and felt shameful. Another hint that they discovered good and evil. So on the surface, it seems that God provides a punishment for everybody involved. But Cass argues that these are not really a newly introduced punishment as a consequence of disobedience, but rather making it clear what it means to have chosen enlightenment and freedom. The punishment is the acute foreknowledge of our natural destiny to live out our humanity under the human condition. So essentially the punishment for eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the punishment is not simply painful childbirth or the patriarchy, or that we're going to be destined to toiling in the fields. The punishment is that we know that those things are a part of the human condition. That's the price we pay for going on the merry-go-round that is humanity and life. So in Genesis chapter 3, the man names his wife Eve, or in Hebrew, Hava, because she is the mother of all living people. Then the Lord God makes clothing for both the man and his wife. He drives the man and his wife out of Eden because they have become like God, knowing good and evil. And now they might also eat from the tree of life and live forever. So they can't be trusted. They got to go. God places the cherubim at the entrance to Eden with a flaming sword. And this image here is really kind of what prompted this whole talk. Because originally what I was going to try and posit is that the story of the expulsion from Eden was a good allegory to humans evolving from, hunter-gatherers to humans that, toil in the fields and have agriculture. But my scope changed a little bit. And with that, Adam and Eve are cast out from the Garden of Eden as human beings destined to work the land as opposed to hunting and gathering. The working of the land implies that the shift from hunter-gatherer society to agriculturally based is tied into this story. Other parts of the Torah or the Hebrew Bible make it clear that God intends for humans to settle. When you have folks working the land, you have people in one place and you have labor specialization, and then you have cities and trade and commerce and resource disparity, wars, everything that makes up our modern life, comes from the fact that we figured out you put a seed in the ground, a plant will grow there, and everything builds from that. The fiery sword of the cherub sends a clear message that we can't go back. There's no going back for humans. We can't become hunter-gatherers again. We can take a Saturday afternoon and we can go berry picking with our families and friends. But there's no going back. We have to return to all of this modern society that exists as a result of being stuck in one place and, agricultural society. So sort of my conclusion on this is that the story of Adam and Eve demonstrates the evolution of man as animal to man as man through his relationship with nature. We talked about, classifying the animals, through the relationship with the divine. The example I gave was them hiding from God, supposedly because they hurt him. Then the relationship with other humans, and this, is the community aspect between Adam and the woman, who is Eve, and then the consciousness, Adam and himself. So these shifts lead eventually, like I said, to the development of our modern human society. So as a result of a nosy serpent, I am left trying to calculate whether my 401k will be sufficient for me to retire at age 65. Thanks a lot, Snake. So we have some discussion questions here, but I want to check the chat here. All right. So Carrie said, I never understood why God would be against being naked. That's a great question. This book went into it, and I obviously didn't put this in this presentation, about the importance of humans and our need to create through art. And he kind of makes the case that one of the first things they do was, realize they're naked, and then they create, which is they get fig leaves and they fashion themselves some clothes. I'm in the middle of this. I'll be done at 1. No. So they make the point that perhaps the aversion to nakedness comes from wanting to prompt humans to create art. So just a theory here in one of the books. Seth says, should settle. Do you mean prescriptive and not merely descriptive? No, I do mean prescriptive. I think it's pretty clear throughout, at least the Torah, that God thinks it's best that humans be settled. I mean, for instance, if we look at the rules in terms of kosher laws, right? It is not morally acceptable in Judaism, unless, you're about to die because of starvation, to hunt. For meat to be acceptable for human consumption, it needs to be raised in a certain way. It needs to be a certain species of animal, such that, cows or, cloved hooves that chew their own cud. And these are, domesticated animals, goats, cows, that kind of thing. The animal needs to be slaughtered in a certain way, not by an arrow, but the throat of the animal being cut. And you can't achieve those instructions unless you're raising the animal yourself and slaughtering it as part of an agricultural society. For instance, technically a giraffe is considered a kosher animal, but they don't know where to slit the throat, and there's not a lot of giraffe farms, because hunting down an animal and killing it, you would not be permissible to eat it by the laws of the Hebrew Bible. So that's why I would say that it is prescriptive over descriptive. All right, so now I have some discussion questions that I hope you'll all chime in. Do you think it matters if this story is historically true? I guess I'll answer first. I grew up in a as the son of a scientist, and learned about the theory of evolution and all this stuff. And I think those theories got legs, in the sense that I think there's a lot of truth to them. But I don't have any dissidence in my own head about Adam and Eve versus, thinking about the story of evolution, where we're told, at some point, some fish crawled up into land and survived, and millions and millions of years later, species mutate and change, and we have all this variety of species in the world today. I think all of that is true, but I also view, the Hebrew Bible as not exactly a historical document, but as the narrative of, the Jewish people, and then, shared by Christians. And I believe that the story of Adam and Eve is in the Quran, at least according to Wikipedia, which I checked. Does anybody, Abdul, did you give me a thumbs up there? Oh, great. Anybody else want to weigh in on, doesn't matter if Adam and Eve is how humans came, as opposed to, evolved from chimpanzees or something like that? And looks like you have your hand raised. You want to unmute yourself and let us know?
I've always felt that it's a parable. And I think that I've always believed, and I can't give you other examples. I mean, I could, but we don't need to today. Other examples in the Bible are parables. And I don't see anything wrong with that, because when you think of Adam and Eve, that's two people. They have sons. Okay, where are those other people going to come from then?
Yeah,
you can't have a lot of strange incestuous things going on to create this huge community. And I've always, since I was a young kid, thought that it was a parable. Yeah. And I'm comfortable with that.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Ann. Abdul, you were giving me a thumbs up, mentioning Adam and Eve in the Islamic tradition. I really don't know anything about that. Can I put you on the spot and ask you to speak a little bit about how Adam and Eve are perceived, through the Quran?
Yes, you can actually, Nate, and great presentation too. So great presentation and pretty cool background you got there going on, my friend. Pretty cool background.
Shukran.
Well, I'll be brief, because I will be, alluding to that in a couple months, and I have, my presentation on prophethood, because in Islam, Adam is considered, not only the first man, but also a prophet, as well. So similarities are the following. God taught Adam all the names of plants, animals, etc. God created Eve, who was named Hawa in Arabic. So Hawa and Hawa. And it was from the tree of knowledge and eating of the apple that Adam and Eve, were both, exiled from heaven and placed on earth. Let's see. What else can we? But to us, and what is written, in the Holy Quran is that Adam, he was a prophet. He had the sons. He raised his sons to believe in the one God, the Creator. Let's see here. God, trying to think off the spot. So Adam was taught, right and wrong, the names of the animals and plants and, things in general. And then spent the rest of his life atoning through prayer and preaching, to his children, and, progeny on the oneness of God. So, that's it, pretty much, in a nutshell.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's interesting. Seems like there's some subtle differences there that, well, hopefully you'll go over in your talk in July, and we can all learn from you.
Sounds good, my friend. I may not be as good as you doing this, today, but I will.
Well, regardless, Abdul, thank you for your contribution there, and I'll make sure to put that one on my calendar. One question that I've always had in thinking about the story of Adam and Eve is, why would God keep the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden anyway? Why not put a fence around it? Seems like a good way to avoid the whole pickle. So, I don't have a good answer for that one, I'm afraid. But I see Justin and Joan Cooper wrote in the chat, I think mankind has a natural inclination to learn and seek knowledge. By placing the tree of knowledge in the garden, it recognizes the fact that knowledge of this world and knowledge of his place in the world is always changing. Justin and or Joan, I love that. I really do. That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, really, these stories are trying to answer very, very big questions and doing it in a way that we can make sense of. So that certainly seems like a good explanation to me. Why a serpent? Why not a spider? This was a question I had in terms of the animal that tempts the woman. Part of me thinks that they wanted to also answer the question of like, why are people scared of snakes? I mean, it does seem like there is sort of a natural fear for a lot of people against snakes. And why not? Why aren't we afraid of squirrels? Why are we afraid of snakes? And so I thought, why not a spider? I mean, I know a lot of people are afraid of spiders. I don't like them. So my reasoning is, they're just trying to answer as many questions as possible. In the Jewish tradition, they say that all answers to all questions are in the Torah. And I guess this checks off, why are people afraid of snakes? And then the other one here, and I thought about this a lot as I was putting this presentation together, also considering the fact that the audience here is, some Jews, some Muslims, some Christians. When it comes to original sin, why does Eve get the short end of the stick? Now, I acknowledge I'm not a Christian person, but my knowledge of original sin, it does seem to put a lot of the blame on Eve when, Adam ate of the fruit of himself and he knew what it was when he ate it. Eve ate the fruit herself. There's plenty of blame to go around, and just felt like Eve really got the short end of the stick. But the concept of original sin is, it's a tough one for me to get behind, in the sense that we should be responsible for our actions and answer for those, but I don't know that we should be held responsible for other people's answer. Yeah, Seth says, my understanding of original sin is that it is, first of all, a Christian and not a Jewish concept. That is absolutely true. It is not a Jewish concept. I have heard it said that original sin is blaming others, Carrie says. It could be. It could be. I'm not an expert on original sin, but it is. I don't know if somebody else has opinions about original sin. I'd love to hear it. And then I wanted to just kind of wrap up at least my portion of it with a meme. Adam, this apple tastes great. Where'd you get it? Eve, the forbidden tree. Adam, surprised. So, let's see. Oh, we got some more stuff in the chat. Oh, Abdul says, in Islam, there's no concept of original sin. God does not place the burden of others on the individual. All right. So I guess Christianity does have the original sin. And my understanding, maybe somebody else can assist with this, is that, Jesus of Nazareth dying on the cross, was that to absolve humanity of the original sin? And, by accepting Jesus, then you're forgiven of the original sin? Is that how that works conceptually?
That's a big question. Seeing nobody else say anything, I can say just a little bit, since I should have some kind of an answer, since I got a couple of degrees in Catholic theology. But one thing that's an important concept for original sin in my understanding of Catholicism, at least, is that baptism is the key way that people have original sin washed away from their souls. And it's kind of a thing. Original sin is just something that everyone is born with, that also helps to explain why bad things happen in the world. It's not the whole of the explanation for that, but it does play a role in that, and answering questions of like, why is there death and suffering and those kinds of things. So it's a piece of all of that. But you're right about Jesus dying on the cross having a part in that. There's kind of parallels between Jesus and his mother Mary, kind of undoing what is understood that Adam and Eve did. And so there's a lot there, but that's just a little bit of what I've encountered as a Catholic. That does not do justice to it, but just some little pieces toward that.
Well, I really thank you for piping in on that, Allie. Appreciate that. Yeah, so I guess it would seem that, in Catholic theology, people are born, maybe not evil, but tainted by the badness of this Adam and Eve thing. Whereas, at least in Judaism, that's not the belief, that people are born with good inclination and bad inclination, and that people should be encouraged to lean into the good side of things. But very interesting, very interesting. Well, that, I don't know that I have anything more intelligent to add to this conversation, but I would love to hear if anybody has thoughts on, maybe I was right, maybe I'm totally wrong. I can accept either.
All right, I got a question. I want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, all right, I'm ready for you.
All right, how does 401k tie into this? You crack me up.
All right, fair enough, Abdul. All right, so admittedly, I was trying to think of a good title that would get people just a little curious, and 401k in this instance is really a stand-in for the modern society we live in, and the complexities of that. The truth is, it has nothing to do with Adam and Eve, aside from the fact that it's another trapping of the modern society we live in that is, vastly different than running around picking berries and, going on with your life and living day to day.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. And you're right. It did spark curiosity. So I wanted to watch this, whether I wanted to or not. You got my attention. So it's good.
Well, I hope you don't feel that I swindled you ideologically.
Nope, not at all. It's all good, man.
All right. Appreciate that. Karen says one has to expect quirky titles for one who usually has a quirky grin. Not Karen's first day dealing with me, obviously. And my mom says if we lived in the garden, we would not need a 401k. That I believe is also true. Unless we eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of retirement plans, which was not necessarily mentioned in the Tanakh, but hey, maybe it's in a midrash somewhere. Who knows? So, all right. With that, again, I really want to thank all of you for spending an hour with me. It's an honor. I hope you don't feel that your time was wasted, and I thank everyone for participating. This was a lot of fun, and if Tri-Faith Initiative approaches you, I recommend you say yes, because it's just a cool way to speak about deep and interesting topics in a friendly environment.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nate. Thanks also for the plug for people to say yes to presenting for this. It's not as intimidating as it seems. But yeah, thank you, Nate, for that really interesting presentation. Sorry about the background noise. My puppy is chewing on a water bottle. But yeah, it was great to hear such a unique perspective that I know I haven't come across before. So it was really enlightening to hear what you had to say about this story from Genesis. And I know I'm going to need to look up feral humans after this on Wikipedia, because that's not something that I've heard a lot of conversation about. So thank you for introducing that concept to us as well. I think that it was great to see people being so engaged in the conversation. So thank you to all of you for being here, for typing things in the chat, for just having your face or your name here, however you participated. It's great to have consistently such a wonderful group of people join us for making the familiar strange. We hope to see you next time when Sharon Royers will be our presenter. And then the time after that, as we mentioned, when Abdul is going to present for us. So for now, we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. And one last thank you again to Nate for sharing such a wonderful presentation and discussion. All right, you're all free to go unless you want to stay and chat a little bit, but thank you all again.
Take care, everyone.